Commander Reese Thorne stood perfectly still as the massive doors of the Thar command chamber slid open. The room was filled with the blue-green light that all Cathars seemed to prefer, making human skin look sickly and strange. Reese had gotten used to it over the 3 years he had served as the human liaison to the mighty alien empire. The Cathar Ascendancy had conquered Earth 5 years ago. They came with ships that blocked out the sun and weapons that could level mountains. Humans fought bravely, but were quickly defeated. Now Earth was just another planet in the vast Cathar Empire, and humans were their newest servants. Reese walked carefully toward the raised platform where High Exarch Kalen sat. The Cathar leader was nearly 8 feet tall, even when seated, with scaled skin that shimmered between deep purple and midnight blue. 4 eyes tracked Reese's movement, and the breathing slits along Kalen's neck fluttered with what Reese had learned was amusement. "Commander Thorne," Kalen's voice boomed through the chamber. "Approach and give your report on the human fleet preparations." Reese bowed low, the way Cathar protocol demanded. "High Exarch, the human ships are ready as ordered. 500 vessels, crewed by our best pilots and soldiers, awaiting your command." Kalen's upper eyes narrowed. "And the special weapon systems? Have they been installed as I demanded?" "Yes, High Exarch. Every ship has been fitted with Thar pulse cannons and shield generators." The massive alien leaned forward. "Good. Your species learns quickly for such primitive creatures. Perhaps that is why we chose to keep you alive rather than simply harvesting your world's resources." Several Cathar officers chittered with laughter around the room. Reese kept his face perfectly blank, but inside his heart pounded. If Kalen could see into his mind at this moment, everything would be lost. "The rebel Zendar forces will soon learn that opposing the Cathar Ascendancy is futile," Kalen continued. "With our primary fleet engaged in the Norellian campaign, these human ships will serve as an adequate distraction, while our real warriors deliver the killing blow." Reese nodded. "The human fleet understands its purpose, High Exarch." Kalen's 4-fingered hand waved dismissively. "Do they? I doubt your kind truly comprehends the honor of dying for the Ascendancy. But it matters not as long as they follow orders." Something about Reese's silence seemed to annoy the High Exarch. The alien ruler stood to his full height, towering over the human commander. "You are unusually quiet today, Commander. Does something trouble you about the battle plan? Perhaps you doubt the wisdom of the Cathar strategists?" Kalen's voice carried a dangerous edge. Reese kept his eyes down, a gesture of respect. "Not at all, High Exarch. I was merely considering the details of deployment. The human mind processes more slowly than your superior Cathar intellect." This seemed to please Kalen, who settled back into his throne-like chair. "Indeed. Your brains are smaller and less efficient. That is why you must follow rather than lead." As the High Exarch began explaining the intricate battle plans for crushing the Zender rebellion, Reese listened carefully while keeping his face expressionless. Only once, when Kalen described how human ships would be positioned at the front of the attack, formation as necessary sacrifices, did Reese's mouth twitch slightly. It wasn't quite a smile. Just a small movement at the corner of his lips, a smirk that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. Kalen didn't notice. None of the Cathar noticed. They never really looked at human faces closely enough to read their expressions. They considered humans too simple, too primitive to hide their thoughts or feelings. That was their first mistake. Reese Thorne hadn't always been so quiet. Before the invasion, he had been a talkative, outgoing officer in Earth's Space Navy. He had friends, told jokes, and spoke his mind freely. Everything changed when the Cathar came. He remembered standing on the bridge of Earth's flagship, watching helplessly as Cathar destroyers tore through Earth's defenses like paper. He remembered the day Earth surrendered, and how the alien conquerors gathered Earth's remaining military leaders. "You will serve the Ascendancy now," the Cathar admiral had announced. "Prove your usefulness, or your species will be deemed unworthy of continued existence." That day, Reese made a promise to himself. He would wait. He would watch. He would learn everything about these conquerors. And someday he would find their weakness. For 3 years, he had played the part of the obedient servant. He learned their language, studied their technology, and observed their habits. Most importantly, he learned that the Cathar were absolutely convinced of their superiority. Now, as he left the command chamber after receiving his final orders from High Exarch Kalen, Reese allowed himself a moment of reflection. The Cathar never suspected that human ships had been secretly modified. They never imagined that human commanders had been meeting in secret, planning for this exact moment. They never considered that humans might be smarter than they appeared. His communication device buzzed quietly against his wrist. A simple text message appeared, "Sundown protocol active." It was time. Reese made his way to the hangar bay where his shuttle waited. Two Kthar guards stood at attention as he approached. "Commander Thorne to return to Human Fleet Base," he stated flatly. The guards barely looked at him as they waved him through. Humans weren't worth their attention. As Reese boarded his shuttle, he thought about how strange it was that the Kthar, for all their advanced technology and military power, could miss something so obvious. When you conquer a species and force them to build your weapons and pilot your ships, you should probably make sure they're truly loyal. As his shuttle pulled away from the massive Kthar command ship, Reese finally allowed himself a real smile. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part. The human fleet base was actually an enormous space station that the Kthar had forced humans to build. It orbited Earth, a constant reminder of who was in control. From space, Earth still looked beautiful blue oceans, swirling white clouds and green-brown continents. But everyone knew that Kthar monitoring posts dotted the planet's surface, watching for any sign of rebellion. When Reese's shuttle docked at the station, Captain Maya Chen was waiting for him. Like all human officers who worked directly with the Kthar, she wore the gray uniform with purple triangles on the collar that marked her as trustworthy in the eyes of their conquerors. "Commander," she greeted him formally, aware of the Kthar cameras that monitored the docking bay. "Was your meeting with the High Exarch productive?" "Very," Reese replied as they walked toward the command center. "The Ascendancy is pleased with our preparations." Once they were inside Reese's office, one of the few places they had managed to make secure from Kthar surveillance, Maya's professional demeanor dropped. "Did they suspect anything?" she asked urgently. Reese shook his head. "Not a thing. Kalen spent an hour telling me how brilliant his battle plan is and how honored we should be to die for the glory of the Ascendancy." Maya snorted. "Typical. Did you get the fleet positions?" Reese pulled out a small data device and projected a holographic map of the upcoming battle area. "Here's where they want us. Human ships in the front, of course, to take the initial Zendar attack, while the Kthar warships hang back here and here." Maya studied the map. "They're using us as bait. Again." "Of course they are," Reese agreed. "But this time it works in our favor." "Have the ship captains been briefed?" "All 500 of them. Everyone knows their role. The modified communication systems are in place, and the weapons upgrades have been hidden exactly as planned." Reese nodded. "And the Zender?" Maya smiled. "Captain Lorette confirmed yesterday. They're ready. They think it's just as funny as we do that the Kthar have no idea our species have been talking. For 6 months, human intelligence officers had been in secret communication with the Zendar, another species that had been conquered by the Kthar ascendancy decades earlier. The Zender rebellion had been carefully orchestrated in cooperation with humans and other subjugated species. It wasn't really a rebellion at all, it was bait for a trap. "What about the other preparations?" Reese asked. "Operation Trojan Horse is fully implemented," Maya confirmed. "Every human technician who's worked on Kthar ships in the past year has planted the override codes. They'll never know what hit them." Reese looked again at the battle map. "Kalen is so convinced of his own genius that he can't imagine being outsmarted. He thinks humans are just simple soldiers following orders." "That's the problem with the Kthar," Maya said. "They conquered us so easily that they never bothered to really learn about us. They don't know our history, our literature, our strategies." "They never read about the Trojan horse," Reese agreed, "or guerrilla warfare, or any of the 1,000 ways that a technologically inferior force can defeat a superior one through cleverness." Maya checked her watch. "The fleet is ready for your inspection, Commander. Everything is on schedule." Reese nodded and stood up. "Then let's go make history." The massive hangar bay stretched before Reese as he and Maya walked along the observation deck. Below them, row after row of battleships and cruisers sat ready for deployment. They weren't as large or as powerful as Kthar vessels, but they were fast and maneuverable. And they contained secrets. A small group of Kthar officials waited near the end of the walkway. At their center stood Sub-Exarch Vren, Kalen's second in command and the Kthar most responsible for overseeing the human fleet. "Commander Thorne," Vren's voice was higher pitched than Kalen's but no less condescending, "I trust your meeting with the High Exarch was informative." "It was, Sub-Exarch," Reese bowed. "The High Exarch's battle strategy is most impressive." Vren's upper eyes narrowed in what Reese had come to recognize as pleasure. "Indeed, few minds in the galaxy can match the High Exarch's tactical brilliance. The Zendar rebels will be crushed, and the Ascendancy will be strengthened by their defeat." "I've come to inspect the fleet before tomorrow's deployment," Reese said. "Of course." Vren gestured to the ships below. "Though I have already personally verified that all vessels are prepared according to Kthar specifications." Reese kept his face carefully neutral. I appreciate your thoroughness, SFICI. However, I must ensure the human crews are psychologically prepared for battle. Our species sometimes requires additional motivation. Vren made a sound that might have been a laugh. Yes, your kind does lack the natural fighting spirit of the Cthar. Very well. Proceed with your inspection. I will accompany you. For the next 4 hours, Reese and Maya visited each section of the fleet, speaking with crew members, while Vren and his assistants watched from a distance. The Cthar didn't bother to listen to the conversations, confident that their translation devices would alert them to any problematic discussions. What they didn't know was that humans had developed a system of coded phrases that sounded innocent to Cathar ears. Remember your training and stay focused, Reese told one group of pilots, which actually meant activate the hidden systems when the signal comes. The Cathar are counting on your courage, he told another group, which meant be ready to turn against them at the critical moment. Throughout the inspection, Vren remained oblivious, occasionally commenting on the simple but adequate design of the human ships, or the commendable if limited training of the crews. At one point, while examining the bridge of the flagship, Vren ran a scaled hand over the control panel. Primitive but functional. It is remarkable that your species managed even this level of technology before we enlightened you. Reese nodded respectfully. We have much to learn from the Cathar ascendancy. Vren seemed pleased by this acknowledgement of Cathar superiority. Perhaps in a few centuries, humans might evolve to become truly useful members of the ascendancy. We can only hope, Sub-Exarch, Reese replied. As they left the flagship, Vren turned to Reese. The High Exarch has great expectations for tomorrow's battle. He believes it will finally break the Zendar rebellion once and for all. I'm sure the High Exarch's prediction will prove accurate, Reese said. Vren's breathing slits fluttered. The High Exarch is never wrong, Commander. Remember that. As the Sub-Exarch walked away, Maya leaned close to Reese and whispered, Everything is ready. Reese nodded slightly. Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow will be a long day. That night, as Reese lay in his quarters trying to sleep, he thought about how many people were counting on him. Not just humans, but Zendar and a dozen other species that had been conquered and oppressed by the Cathar ascendancy. If their plan failed, the consequences would be devastating. The Cathar would likely destroy Earth as punishment. But if they succeeded, Reese closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. After 3 years of planning and preparation, after countless small deceptions and carefully orchestrated moments, they had finally reached the critical point. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, the Cathar would learn that humans were not as simple as they seemed. The command center of the Thar flagship Unyielding Dominance hummed with activity as High Exarch Kalen surveyed the tactical display. The massive holographic projection showed hundreds of ships arranged in precise formation. The human fleet formed the front lines, with the more powerful Cathar warships positioned behind them. The Zendar rebels approach, High Exarch, reported a Cathar officer. Their fleet matches our intelligence estimates. Kalen's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of satisfaction. Excellent. They have committed all their forces, just as I predicted. Today we will end this irritating rebellion once and for all. Sub-Exarch Vren stood at attention nearby. The human fleet is in position and awaiting your command. Kalen tapped a long finger against the arm of his command chair. And Commander Thorn? Is he prepared to lead his people to a glorious sacrifice? He is aboard the human flagship, Vren confirmed. He understands the role his fleet will play. Kalen made a dismissive gesture. Humans are such simple creatures, so easily controlled through fear and the illusion of respect. They actually believe we value their contribution. The Cathar officers around him chittered with laughter. Begin the attack, Kalen ordered. Signal the human fleet to engage the Zendar ships. On the bridge of the human flagship Defiance, Reese Thorn sat in the commander's chair, watching the tactical display with Captain Maya Chen at his side. The Zendar fleet approached slowly, their ships arranged in what appeared to be a standard attack formation. To any Cathar observer, the scene would look exactly as expected. The human fleet preparing to engage the enemy while the superior Cathar forces waited to deliver the finishing blow. Reese's communication device chimed. Commander Thorn, came the voice of High Exarch Kalen. You may commence your attack on the Zendar fleet. Understood, High Exarch, Reese replied, keeping his voice even and respectful. We will engage immediately. As the communication ended, Maya turned to Reese. They're monitoring all standard channels. Are you ready? Reese nodded and pressed a hidden button under the arm of his chair. This activated a communication system that the humans had secretly installed, one that the Cathar didn't know existed. All ships, this is Commander Thorn. Operation Trojan Horse is now active. I repeat, Operation Trojan Horse is now active. Execute Phase 1. Across the human fleet, captains received the message and relayed orders to their crews. The ships continued toward the Zendar fleet as if preparing to attack. But inside each vessel, technicians were activating systems that had been hidden from Thar inspectors. On the unyielding Dominance, Kalen watched with satisfaction as the human fleet advanced. "See how they rush to obey," he remarked to Vren. "So eager to please their masters." Vren's breathing slits fluttered. "Indeed, High Exarch. They know their place in the natural order." Suddenly, a Cathar officer called out in alarm. "High Exarch, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the human vessels." Kalen leaned forward. "Explain." "Their power outputs are fluctuating in an irregular pattern," the officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "And they appear to be activating systems that are not in our technical specifications." For the first time, a flicker of concern crossed Kalen's features. "Contact Commander Thorne immediately." Back on the Defiance, Reese received the incoming communication from the Thar flagship. He nodded to Maya, who activated their prepared response, a pre-recorded message of Reese looking concerned and reporting technical difficulties, ending with a promise to resolve the issues quickly. "What is happening, Commander Thorne?" Kalen demanded. The recording played perfectly. To Kalen, it appeared that Reese was responding in real time, explaining that some systems were malfunctioning, but assuring him that everything was under control. In reality, Reese was issuing orders for Phase 2 of their plan. "Begin targeting protocols," he commanded through the secure channel. "Zendar fleet, move to position Alpha." The approaching Zendar ships suddenly changed formation, moving to flank the Cathar fleet rather than engaging the human vessels head-on. On the unyielding Dominance, chaos erupted as officers reported the unexpected maneuver. "The Zendar are changing formation," shouted a tactical officer. "They're moving to surround our position." Kalen rose from his chair, his massive frame tense with sudden anger. What trickery is this? Why are they ignoring the human fleet? Before anyone could answer, another officer called out, "High Exarch, our systems are behaving strangely. Ship controls are becoming unresponsive." Vren rushed to a control panel, his fingers moving rapidly across the display. "Something is infiltrating our command protocols. Some kind of override code." Kalen's 4 eyes widened in shock and then narrowed in fury. "The humans," he hissed. "Contact all Cathar vessels. Tell them to prepare for possible sabotage." But it was already too late. Throughout the Cathar fleet, systems began to fail. Weapons went offline. Shields powered down. Engines shut off. Communication arrays stopped responding. And through it all, the human fleet maintained its position, weapons now clearly targeting the Cathar vessels instead of the Zendar ships. On the bridge of the Defiance, Reese opened a communication channel to the unyielding Dominance. This time it was a real-time transmission, not a recording. "High Exarch Kalen," he said, his voice calm and steady. "I believe we need to discuss new terms for our relationship." Kalen's face filled the view screen, his scaled features contorted with rage. "What have you done, human? This is treason against the Ascendancy." Reese allowed himself a small smile. "No, High Exarch. This is liberation." High Exarch Kalen stared at the view screen in disbelief. The human commander, who had always been so quiet, so obedient, now looked back at him with confident eyes. "You cannot possibly hope to defeat the Cathar Ascendancy," Kalen growled. "Even if you have temporarily disabled our ships, reinforcements will come. The full might of our empire will crush your pathetic rebellion." Reese Thorne's expression remained calm. "That might be true if your empire was still intact. But at this exact moment, similar operations are underway in 27 star systems. The species you conquered, the humans, the Zendar, the Lorax, the Vin, we've all been planning this day for years." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Kalen's alien features. "Impossible. Our security protocols were designed to prevent communication between subjugated species," Reese finished for him. "But you never considered that we might find ways around them. You were so convinced of your superiority that you allowed humans to work on your communication systems, your weapons, your engines, every critical system in your fleet." On the tactical display behind Kalen, red warning lights were flashing across the representation of the Thar fleet. Ships were going dark one by one as dormant programs activated, programs secretly installed by human technicians over the past 3 years. "Sub-Exarch," Kalen roared. "Restore our systems immediately." Vren was frantically working at a control panel. "I cannot, High Exarch. They've locked us out of our own command protocols." On the screen, Reese continued. "For 3 years, I've stood in your command chamber. I've bowed my head and spoken only when spoken to. I've endured your contempt and your condescension. And all that time I was watching, learning, finding your weaknesses. Around Reese on the bridge of the Defiance, human officers worked with calm efficiency, coordinating with the Zender fleet as they surrounded the disabled Cathar vessels. Your greatest weakness, High Exarch, Reese said, was your arrogance. You believed humans were primitive because we didn't have your technology. You thought we were simple because we didn't fight back immediately. You never bothered to study our history, to learn that humans have thousands of years of experience with warfare, deception, and rebellion against oppressors. Kalen's breathing slits flared in fury. You will regret this treachery, human. The Cathar do not forget, and we do not forgive. Reese leaned forward slightly. There's something you should understand about humans, High Exarch. We don't forget either. We remember everything, every insult, every act of cruelty, every friend and family member who died during your invasion. And we've been planning our response since the day you arrived. On the unyielding dominance, more systems were failing by the second. Life support remained operational, but weapons, shields, and engines were completely disabled. The rest of the Ascendancy will crush you for this, Kalen threatened. I doubt that, Reese replied calmly. Right now, the central communication hub of the Ascendancy on Cathar Prime is being taken over by Zender operatives. Similar operations are happening at every major Cathar military installation across the galaxy. Your empire is falling, High Exarch, and you never saw it coming. Kalen sank back into his command chair, his four eyes blinking rapidly as he tried to process this catastrophic turn of events. How, he finally asked, his voice quieter now, how did primitive humans orchestrate something like this? Reese allowed himself another small smile. Do you remember all those meetings where I stood silently while you explained your brilliant strategies? I was memorizing everything, your tactics, your thinking patterns, your blind spots. And there was one moment, about 2 years ago, when I realized your fundamental flaw. Kalen stared at the screen. What flaw? You believe that conquest equals control, Reese explained. You think that because you can destroy a planet from orbit, you can also control every aspect of life on that planet. But occupation is different from conquest, High Exarch. When you force people to build your ships and manage your systems, you make yourself vulnerable to them. Around the disabled Cathar fleet, human and Zendar vessels had completed their encirclement. The tactical situation was now completely reversed. The Cathar were surrounded and powerless. What now, human? Kalen asked, his voice carrying both anger and resignation. Will you destroy our ships, murder our crews in revenge? Reese shook his head. That's what the Cathar would do. But we're not like you. We're offering terms of surrender that will allow your people to live in peace, as equals rather than conquerors. He tapped a control, and a document appeared on Kalen's screen. A formal declaration from the newly formed Alliance of Free Worlds, outlining terms for the peaceful integration of Cathar into a new galactic community. Your choice is simple, Reese continued. Accept these terms and help us build something better than the Ascendancy ever was, or refuse and face the consequences of your actions. For a long moment, Kalen stared at the document. His entire worldview, the absolute supremacy of the Thar, and their right to rule over lesser species was crumbling before his eyes. You planned this all along, he finally said, looking up at Reese. From the very first day you stood before me, silent and seemingly submissive. Reese nodded. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, High Exarch. That's something your people never understood about humans. And that day in the command chamber, Kalen continued, when I was explaining how your ships would be sacrificed, you smirked. I saw it just for a moment, but I dismissed it. That was the day I knew our plan would work, Reese confirmed. Because you saw my reaction and still didn't suspect anything. That was when I knew your arrogance would be your downfall. Kalen's breathing slits closed and opened slowly, a sign of deep thought among the Cathar. Finally, he spoke again. The Cathar have never surrendered to anyone in our 1,000-year history. Then perhaps it's time to make history, Reese replied. The terms are fair, High Exarch. More fair than the terms you offered Earth and the other worlds you conquered. Around Kalen, his officers watched in tense silence, awaiting his decision. The future of their species hung in the balance. 3 days after what was already being called Liberation Day across a dozen worlds, Reese Thorne stood at the observation window of the space station orbiting Earth. The view had changed dramatically. Where once Cathar warships had dominated the sky, now a mixture of vessels from various species moved peacefully through orbital lanes. The door behind him slid open, and Captain Maya Chen entered. The last of the Cathar command ships has powered down weapon systems, she reported. High Exarch Kalen has officially transmitted his acceptance of the alliance terms to all Cathar colonies. Reese nodded. Any resistance? Some isolated incidents, but nothing organized. Most Cathars seemed shocked by how quickly their empire collapsed. It was always more fragile than they realized, Reese observed. An empire built on fear and force rather than cooperation was bound to fall eventually. Maya joined him at the window. I still can't believe it worked. 3 years of planning, thousands of people keeping secrets, coordination across multiple star systems. So many things could have gone wrong. But they didn't, Reese said. Because we understood something the Cathar never did: the power of patience and silent resistance. The door opened again, and both officers turned in surprise as High Exarch Kalen ducked through the human-sized entrance. Without his ceremonial armor and surrounded by human architecture, the alien leader seemed somewhat less imposing than before, though he still towered over the humans. Commander Thorne? Kalen's voice was subdued compared to his usual booming tone. I've come to discuss the transition. Reese nodded to Maya, who saluted and left the room, closing the door behind her. Of course, High Exarch. Reese gestured to a chair that had been specially reinforced for Cathar physiology. Please, Zoe, sit. Kalen settled into the chair, his 4 eyes studying Reese with new intensity. I've been reviewing Earth's historical records, he said finally. Your species has a remarkable tradition of resistance against overwhelming force. Guerrilla warfare, underground movements, Trojan horses. He pronounced the unfamiliar terms carefully. We've had a lot of practice, Reese acknowledged. Humans have been fighting each other for millennia. When the Cathar arrived, we applied those same principles on a galactic scale. Kalen's breathing slits fluttered. The ascendancy made a critical error in our assessment of human psychology. We believed your cooperation indicated acceptance of our superiority. A natural mistake, Reese said. The Cathar have always valued strength and directness. When humans appeared submissive, you assumed we were genuinely conquered in spirit as well as in fact. And we were wrong, Kalen admitted. That silence, that apparent submission, masked a determination we never suspected. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Commander, how many humans knew about this plan? Thousands, Reese replied. Every ship captain, every technician who worked on Cathar vessels, every communications officer who helped establish secret contact with the Zendar and other species. We maintained absolute secrecy not through fear, but through shared purpose. Kalen was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. The terms of the alliance agreement, they are more generous than I expected. No executions of Cathar leaders, no dismantling of our culture or government, just equality with other species. Revenge isn't our goal, Reese explained. Creating a stable, peaceful galaxy is. The Cathar have much to contribute: your technology, your organizational skills, your determination. We just need those things directed toward cooperation rather than conquest. Outside the window, a Zender diplomatic vessel glided past, its elegant design contrasting with the more utilitarian human ships nearby. My warriors are struggling to understand this new reality, Kalen said. For generations, we believed in Cathar supremacy. The idea of partnership with species we once conquered is challenging. Change is always difficult, Reese acknowledged. But it's necessary. The age of empires is ending, High Exarch. The future belongs to alliances and cooperation. Kalen's upper eyes narrowed. You orchestrated my defeat, destroyed my empire, and yet you speak to me with respect. Why? Reese considered the question carefully. Because holding on to hatred only perpetuates the cycle of violence. And because I believe you can help lead your people into this new era. For the first time in their acquaintance, Kalen seemed genuinely thoughtful rather than dismissive or condescending. You are not what I expected, Commander Thorne. Perhaps humans are more complex than we understood. All species are complex, High Exarch, Reese replied. That's something we're all going to learn as we work together. Kalen stood, his full height nearly reaching the ceiling of the human-designed room. I should return to my ship. My officers await instructions on implementing the Alliance protocols. As the Cathar leader moved toward the door, he paused and turned back. One question has been troubling me, Commander. When did you first conceive of this plan? When did you decide that the Cathar could be defeated? Reese smiled slightly. The day your ships arrived in Earth's orbit, High Exarch. The moment we realized we couldn't win through direct confrontation, we began planning a different kind of victory. Kalen's breathing slits fluttered in what might have been reluctant admiration. Then your patience is even more remarkable than I thought. After the Cathar leader had gone, Maya returned to the observation room. How did it go? Better than expected, Reese said. I think he's beginning to understand. Maya looked out at the vessels moving peacefully through Earth's orbit. Do you think it will last, this alliance? It has to, Reese replied. The alternative is endless cycles of conquest and rebellion. I believe most species, including the Cathar, will choose peace when given a genuine opportunity. As they watched, a small shuttle carrying representatives from 6 different species docked with the station. The first meeting of the Alliance Council was scheduled to begin in an hour, with Reese representing humanity and Kalen representing the former Cathar ascendancy. What happens now, Maya asked. Reese turned from the window. Now we build something that lasts. Something better than what came before. He smiled. And we remember the lesson that saved us all. Which is? Always watch out for the quiet ones, Reese said, especially when they smirk.